Hello and welcome back to the Korean Beauty Show podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Lee, founder of Kbeauty brand Jellyco and your guide to all things Korean skincare, makeup, and more. So for this week's deep dive episode, I am going to be talking about my top tips for reapplying sunscreen on the days that you are wearing makeup. I think this is a really common conundrum. If you have a full face of makeup on and you're planning to go out, but you're going to be out in the sun for a while, obviously, you need to keep reapplying your sunscreen if you are being exposed to the sun. But how best to do that? That is exactly what we are going to be going through on the show today. But first, today's episode was brought to you by the new online Kbeauty collection at Woolworths Everyday Marketplace in Australia. You can shop hundreds of Korean beauty products from the comfort of your own home while you're picking up your groceries at Woolworths Everyday Marketplace. So go and check that out if you are in need of a couple of groceries and a few Kbeauty products as well. All right, so reapplying our sunscreen on top of our makeup. Now, this can be so tricky, especially because, you don't want to ruin your face with makeup, but then you also don't want to be without sun protection. So how is the best way to go about that? Obviously, I think it goes without saying at this point, because we've spoken about it so often on the show, that, it is really important that we are wearing sunscreen, even on the days that, we are going to be doing makeup, maybe having an event outside. I know the big one for me is, if you're going to be doing maybe a wedding, if you're going to a wedding or an event, maybe the polo, the races, something like that outside, you're going to be standing around all day, but you want to have a face of makeup on. Those are the kind of things that I remember I used to do in Australia. Weddings outside in Korea, not so much. We generally tend to do them inside, and they're also very short and sharp here as well. I'm not sure if you guys have ever been to a wedding in Asia, but I know the weddings that I have been to in places like Hong Kong and Korea, certainly it's all indoors. It's in like a wedding hall or something like that, and the bride and groom get allocated maybe a couple of hours and they have to do the entire ceremony, the food, the cake, everything in like 2 or 3 hours, and then clear out, and then there's another person coming in after them. So that is obviously very different from the way that we do weddings in other parts of the world. Certainly in Australia, it's pretty much an all-day affair. You maybe start the wedding maybe at 12, maybe 1, 2, 3 if it's a little bit later, and then we basically go all night. So I think on days like that is the days that I'm most worried about, well, how am I going to reapply my makeup when I'm out for so long standing around outside? So the reason that we're obviously wearing sunscreen is because sun exposure is one of the key causes of aging, and it can also result in things that you might not realize are caused by the sun, but blotchiness, redness, things like that. Obviously the obvious signs are things like sunspots, pigmentation, and wrinkles and whatnot. But if you have seen a little bit too much sun, you'll notice the next day often that your skin is quite blotchy and red, and that is directly caused by being in the sun for too long. So when we're wearing a sunscreen, the ideal formulation is something that obviously blocks both the UVB, the burning rays, and the UVA, which are the aging rays. And so, we have a couple of episodes just on sunscreen. So go back and listen to them if you are sort of curious about the ins and outs of the UVB protection, the star system, how sunscreen works in Korean beauty as well, the PA rating system. You can go back and have a listen to them. But today we're just going to focus on all the tips specifically around makeup. So look, I think one of the first places to start is actually when you are putting your makeup on, and making sure that you are applying a proper sunscreen underneath your makeup in the morning. That is the first place to start. The easiest place to start is layering your sunscreen underneath your makeup. Now, my tip for this is to, once you've applied your sunscreen, and you can apply it over the top of your moisturizer, there is no problem with doing that. If you're sort of wondering how the layering part of it all works, you do your normal skincare, you apply your moisturizer, and then you can put your sunscreen on. Before you go straight in with your makeup over the top, I usually like to wait a few minutes just to make sure that the sunscreen is actually dry. So the other thing I would say is a lot of say tinted products in the market these days, even makeup has an SPF factor in it. So you might be tempted to say, well, hey, my foundation actually already has sunscreen in it, so I'll just use that. I'll rely on that. And I would say don't do that. And the main reason is because, if you are looking at the stated level of protection, say your foundation says that it has an SPF of 50 plus in it. Unfortunately, when you look at how much product you would need to apply to actually get the stated level, the SPF 50 plus, it's just so much more makeup than you would put on your skin. So if you were actually to go and put that on, it would just be like, layers and layers, and you would look like you're wearing a mask. And that's not usually how people like to apply their makeup. They like to apply their makeup to look natural and sit nicely on the skin. So that's just the first, common mistake I see people make, is to think, well, if I've got sunscreen in my makeup or my BB cream, I'll just rely on that. So put on a special purpose SPF 50 plus, ideally in the morning before you put your makeup on. That will be the best place to start. And I guess then, if you do happen to have a product that has sunscreen in it as well, that's just an extra layer. So I think that is, if you do have a product like that you can swap over to, that's awesome, because you've just got that one more layer that you can rely on as well. The other thing is, I find in terms of, particularly when it comes to things like layering sunscreen, that BB creams work really, really well compared to a lot of foundations in terms of just allowing you to layer things on the top. And even if you do need to go back and reapply later, that they don't tend to cake or pill like a lot of other formulas. So that might be one reason to look at swapping over to something like a Korean BB cream or a Korean BB cushion, is just because of how well they layer, and that they do let you come back a few hours later. And that's because if you come to Korea, you will see people sort of sitting on the train, people sitting outside, just sort of dab, 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 pat, pat, patting their cushion back into their face pretty much all day. And particularly at the moment with, masks and things like that, you take your mask off, your makeup is smudged, you need to reapply it. So Korean makeup products in general, base makeup products, I would say, are very well adapted and suited to re-layering and reapplying, just because that's how Koreans tend to use them. So that is one other little tip I can give you. If you are just wearing a regular foundation, have a look at what else is out there on the market in terms of like being able to reapply a lot easier. You will find that Korea has a lot more options in that respect as well. So look, if you do need to be out in the sun during the day while wearing your makeup, then there are a couple of ways that you can reapply your sunscreen over the top of your makeup. Now, the first way is with your palms. So basically you can literally put the sunscreen into your palms and just like press it, gently pat it over the top of your makeup. I think if the formula that you're using is tend to be like a lighter formula, then it's not going to ruin the look of your makeup. The other really great hack I have tried and that I have seen people doing is, if you do have a BB cushion, they come with a little puff in the compact. So you can actually use the puff to re-puff your sunscreen. So just apply a little bit of your sunscreen into the BB cushion puff, and then you can dab it over the top of your face like you do when you're actually applying your BB cream. That's one way. Another way is that a lot of brands have seen that people are doing that, seen that that's how they're using their BB cushion puffs. And so some brands have even come out with their own cushion, a sunscreen cushion product that basically just has the sunscreen formula in the cushion, so that you can do that. So you can either DIY it, say you've already got an old BB cream puff and you have a sunscreen that you really love, you can DIY it and just use the two together, or you could go out and buy a cushion product, a sunscreen cushion product like that. The other way I've seen people do it, although I think personally this is probably a little bit messy, particularly if you're already out on the go, but But I've seen some people use like a beauty blender, and they basically apply a couple of drops of sunscreen onto a beauty blender and then use that to sort of puff onto their face to dab more sunscreen into their skin. You can do that, but I just think beauty blender on the road, can get a little bit gross if you don't have anywhere to put it, maybe in your bag or whatnot. That could be a little bit messy, but that's certainly another DIY option that I've seen people use that is, potentially effective as well. The only thing I will say with all of these techniques that use like a sponge, a blender, or a puff is just be careful if you have got it really sweaty. If you're out and about and you're really sweaty, just be careful not to double dip back into the compact for your reapplication if you're really sweaty, because this can cause bacteria and just also cause the product to, become a little bumpy and hard with the excess oil. So if you're really sweaty, you might need a special sponge just for the day and then throw it out rather than using, something that you use for your own makeup every day. That's just one other little tip. Now, the other tip I had for you is, if you know for a fact that, okay, I'm going to be outside today and I do need to actually reapply, then try and think about the type of makeup that you're using. And the best type of makeup for doing a reapplication is a liquid type of makeup. So, if you normally use a powder, I would say don't reapply a liquid over the top of a powder. That's just going to cake and flake and go really, really gross. Liquids with liquids, a liquid sunscreen with a liquid type of foundation or BB cream, as well as liquid blushes and bronzers. Keep that in mind as well. If you're going in with a blusher or a bronzer, if you're using a powder, then it can get cakey if you're doing a liquid over the top of that. So that's my number 4 tip, is liquids with liquids. Stick to your liquid foundations and BB creams, and that way you won't have any issues with caking and flaking when you're doing your sunscreen over the top of that. Also, I guess this tip, the number 5 tip, goes hand in hand, which is, opt for a lighter weight sunscreen on those days. Anything that's really thick and heavy or requires a lot of rubbing in to sort of disperse it, that's probably going to disturb your makeup. So I would just not use those kind of products on those days and just opt for a lighter weight sunscreen. I think that's a pretty easy one. And then the last one is a little bit of a cheat one, because it's not really a tip at all. It is limit your sun exposure. Obviously, prevention is better than a cure. Just remember that the sun's harshest hours, its harshest rays, are about from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So if there's any way that you can get out of the sun, maybe you can wear long sleeves, also a hat, sunnies, maybe anything to cover yourself while you are walking in the sun, a parasol, an umbrella. That is going to be, the ideal way to go about it, is to have your sunscreen on, obviously, and then also to limit your sun exposure. Now, the other thing is that if you are wearing chemical sunscreens, you need to reapply them after 2 hours of actual sun exposure, and then more often if you are going swimming. So obviously I think if you're going to be going swimming in makeup, that's probably not, you're probably not going to be doing that anyway, but that's just like a general rule. Now, the one product that I always see people mention when it comes to makeup and sunscreen and reapplication is the mist type of sunscreen products. Now, look, this is just my personal preference, but I am not a massive fan of sunscreen mist type products. And that is because I just worry that I'm not going to get the stated amount of protection, because the formula is basically being dispersed as you apply it. As you spray it, it's also flying away into the air, into the ether. And I want the sunscreen protection on my face. So that's just a personal preference for me, but I noticed that the TGA in Australia actually did announce at the end of last year that it is cracking down on mist type SPF products over the summer and into 2022. So basically what the TGA came out and said is they're going to be looking into the effectiveness of aerosol sunscreens when they are applied according to the instructions on the label. And one of the representatives said that the active ingredients in aerosol sunscreens are more dilute than many lotion and cream sunscreens because they need to be mixed with propellants. And what that means is that a large amount of aerosol sunscreens need to be applied to reach the same coverage as lotion and cream sunscreens. The TGA is concerned that many people do not apply adequate amount of aerosol sunscreens, in part because many are more expensive than cream and lotion sunscreens. So what they've said is that sponsors of aerosol sunscreens, which is basically the legal language for the person that's introducing the product into the market, they're expected to maintain records showing that they comply with the regulations and ensure the effectiveness of their product when it is used as intended. So if the TGA identifies a problem that cannot be addressed by the manufacturer, then the product might be removed from the Australian market. So that's their, I guess, perspective on mist type sunscreens. That's not to say that they're not that they're not effective, but just that there are some concerns about, first, people applying them correctly, people applying the right amount, and then also reapplying them. So just keep an eye out on that. If you are a fan of mist type products, if you are using them, just make sure that you're using them according to the label and that you're applying, firstly, enough, and secondly, reapplying enough as well. So look, I hope some of those tips were useful. I'll just run over them quickly again. The first thing is to start with the right base and make sure that you're actually wearing a sunscreen in the morning. The second one is obviously to consider swapping your foundation over for a product that has SPF as well, just so that you're getting an extra layer of sunscreen. The third one is to pat your sunscreen over your makeup. And we discussed a couple of different ways that you can do that. The fourth was liquids with liquids, so liquid sunscreen with liquid makeup. The fifth was to opt for lighter weight sunscreens rather than the thicker ones. And then the sixth one was to limit your sun exposure. So hopefully you have picked up a tip or two in there. If I've missed any, if you have a really great way that you reapply your sunscreen when you're wearing makeup, please come and find me and let me know. I am on Instagram at lauren.kbeauty. I would love to know what your hack is, your tip is, and we can share it with the listeners as well. So those were the ones that I had. If you have any others, come and find me. But otherwise, I will leave it there. I will be back next week with more content for you. And until then, I will see you on Star Story.